Hello, and welcome to another vlog. You may remember me saying last week that yesterday was International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and to celebrate, Squeaky Productions would be hosting a bowling party at Bowlemore Lanes in Bridgewater. Now, that event was actually part of the Thrive Worldwide campaign, which is an annual campaign put on by a disability organization called Able Thrive, which is based in San Francisco, to essentially mark the occasion. Now, Able Thrive actually sent out an email to all of their supporters last week outlining the campaign in more detail, so I'd like to read to you what they said. They said, "Thanks for being a part of Thrive Worldwide, Able Thrive's campaign to unite those who believe everyone deserves a chance to thrive. This happens every year, but this year is the biggest year yet. We are one meetup out of more than 40 in about 20 countries, all coming together with the same purpose of celebrating living life to the fullest and advancing inclusion." So essentially what they're saying is that Thrive Worldwide is a campaign to not only celebrate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, but also to help make the world more inclusive. So as part of that, Squeaky Productions held our event last night, which was a bowling party. So we all met at the bowling alley last night. In total, there was about 6 of us, all friends and family, and we bowled for about an hour, starting about 6 p.m. Now, our scores range from about 40 to 55. Obviously, not the most impressive bowling scores, but we were there to have fun, and we did have fun. So anyway, we bowled for about an hour, and then after that, we went into the party room and we feasted on some pizza and cake. We laughed and joked around, opened some treat bags, took some photos, and just had a really good time. And by the end of it, we not only left with full bellies, but also big smiles because we just had so much fun. And all in all, it was a very enjoyable event, and perhaps we'll do it again next year. We'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, we did take some pictures at the event, and I've posted them on Facebook and Instagram for anyone who wants to see them. Now I'd like to switch topics and talk a little bit about this week's theme, which is personal care. Specifically, I want to talk about the process of providing personal care. Now, personal care can be divided into 4 main steps, which I'm going to talk about briefly. So the first step is assessment. So at this stage, the caregiver and the individual receiving care need to work together to identify the individual's needs and existing diagnosis. And that's going to form the basis of the care that they receive. The second step is planning. So essentially, the individual and the caregiver work together and take the information collected during step 1 and use it to develop a care plan that outlines the type of care that the individual will require and how that care is going to be delivered and evaluated. Stage 3, or step 3, is to take that care plan and implement it. It's implementation. So essentially, you enact the care plan and you provide the appropriate care to the individual as required. Pretty self-explanatory. And then the final step is evaluation. So essentially, you need to periodically review the care plan as a team and decide what's working, what isn't, and kind of reevaluate and make any changes necessary to make the care plan more efficient and more effective. Now, full disclosure, when I was researching this video, the source that I found actually listed the care process as 5 steps. And that was because that particular process was tailored for nursing in a hospital or medical setting. But for the purposes of this video, we're talking about nursing in a practical or home setting. And so for that reason, I've kind of combined the first 2 steps, which were assessment and diagnosis. The assumption being that when you hire a caregiver, they already know what the individual they're caring for's diagnosis is, and the main goal is to determine what their specific needs are and what kind of care they require. And you may have noticed that when I was talking about the steps, I talked a lot about the caregiver and the individual receiving care working together. That's because from my personal experience as someone who receives care on a daily basis, personal care really is about teamwork. It's not up to one individual to call all the shots. It's about working together to find the best solution to solve the problem and to provide care to that individual. And at the end of the day, personal care is really about enabling individuals to live independent and functional lives so that they can live not necessarily on their own, but live how they choose. Because under the UN Convention and the Canadian um, Charter of Human Rights and many other constitutions, people have the right to live and work where they choose. Now, unfortunately, the reality is that oftentimes people with disabilities are excluded from that. There are many jurisdictions, Nova Scotia included, where there are very few services for people with disabilities. So people with permanent disabilities, specifically those who require 24-hour care, often find themselves in a situation where they have to choose between making do with limited funding or moving into a care facility. And oftentimes, people with disabilities have no choice but to move into a care facility against their wishes because they have no other options. And although I'm not in that situation myself, I do know quite a few young people with disabilities who are, and some of them aren't very happy with their current living situation because they feel like they were kind of forced into it. They'd rather be living in their own apartment than living in a care facility. Um, and the solution to that is to provide more services for people with disabilities so that they can live and work where they choose. And without putting any figures, I'm hoping that this can be a learning experience where we can kind of identify the problem and acknowledge it and find an effective solution to that problem and to help make the world more accessible and more inclusive for all. Because at the end of the day, that's really what the International Day of Persons with Disabilities is all about, is celebrating our abilities and helping to make the world more accessible and more inclusive for everybody. Um, so I'm going to include a link in the description talking more about Able Thrive and the Thrive Worldwide campaign for anybody who wants to see that. And on Thursday, I will be releasing a video in which I talk more about what personal care is, who benefits from it, and why it's important. So subscribe if you want to see that video. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, as always, be sure to support me on Patreon and follow Squeaky Productions on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Anyway, thanks for watching and see you on Thursday.